Have you noticed that climbing the stairs to your bedroom leaves you more winded than it used to? Maybe your hands and feet feel cold even when you're bundled up indoors. Or there's a kind of fatigue that settles in by mid-afternoon that just wasn't part of your life 5 or 10 years ago. If any of this sounds familiar, I want you to know you're not imagining it, and you're certainly not alone. These changes can be frustrating, especially when you're doing everything you've been told to do. You're watching your diet, you're staying as active as you can, and maybe you're already taking medications your doctor prescribed for cholesterol or blood pressure. Those things matter, they really do, and I would never suggest you stop doing what's working for you. But here's what I've learned after years of working with older adults. There's often one piece of the puzzle that doesn't get nearly enough attention during routine checkups, and it's a piece that can make a genuine difference in how you feel day to day. You've probably heard the standard advice over and over. Lower your cholesterol, watch your sodium, take your medications, and yes, those are important foundations. But what if I told you that your body needs something specific to keep your circulatory system working the way it should, and that many adults over 60 are unknowingly running low on it? Not because they're doing anything wrong, but simply because our modern diet and lifestyle have shifted away from the foods that naturally provided it. Today we're going to talk about that missing piece. It's not complicated, it's not experimental, and it's backed by solid research. But it's something that rarely comes up unless you specifically ask about it. I'm going to walk you through exactly what it is, why it matters more as we age, and what you can realistically do to support your body in a safe, evidence-based way. This isn't about quick fixes or miracle cures. It's about understanding how your body works and giving it what it needs to help you stay independent, active, and confident. So take a comfortable seat, and let's have an honest, straightforward conversation about your circulation, your energy, and a nutrient that deserves a lot more attention than it's been getting. Picture this. It's a Tuesday morning and you're getting ready to walk down to the mailbox. It's not far, maybe 50, 60 feet, but halfway there, you notice your legs feel heavier than they should. Your breath comes a little quicker. By the time you're back inside, you need a moment to settle before you can sort through the envelopes. Or maybe it's your hands that have been bothering you. Even when the thermostat reads 72 degrees and you're wearing a sweater, your fingers feel cool to the touch, almost like the warmth just isn't reaching them the way it used to. And here's the part that might frustrate you the most. You're doing everything right. You've cut back on salt. You're taking your medications exactly as prescribed. You've swapped out white bread for whole grain, and you're drinking more water than you ever thought possible. You're not sitting around all day, you're moving, you're trying. And yet, there's this persistent sluggishness, this sense that your body isn't quite keeping up with your intentions. You might even feel a little defeated, wondering if this is just how things are going to be from now on. Let me say this clearly. It's not your fault. Your body's needs change as the years go by, and the advice that worked beautifully when you were 40 or 50 doesn't always account for what's happening inside your cells and your blood vessels now. The standard recommendations are built on important foundations, but they're often incomplete. They address part of the picture, but not the whole story. And when something's missing, you feel it, not as a diagnosis on a chart, but as a lived experience. The fatigue, the chill in your extremities, the sense that you're working harder for less result. What I want you to hear today is this. You deserve to feel capable in your own body. You deserve to walk to the mailbox without wondering if you'll need to rest afterward. You deserve to have warm hands when you're sitting with your morning coffee, and to have the energy to do the things that matter to you, whether that's gardening, playing with your grandchildren, or simply moving through your day without that constant, nagging tiredness. You want to stay active. You want to keep your routines. You want to feel confident and independent. And that's not asking too much. That's exactly what we're supporting today. Not with empty promises or gimmicks, but with a clear understanding of what your body actually needs to function the way it's designed to, and how to give it that support in a safe, realistic, and sustainable way. So what's actually happening inside your body that makes these everyday tasks feel harder than they used to? Let me walk you through this in plain language, because understanding the why makes everything else make sense. As we move through our 60s, 70s, and beyond, our arterial walls naturally begin to lose some of their flexibility. Think of a brand new garden hose compared to one that's been out in the sun for 10 years. The newer one bends easily, water flows through it smoothly. The older one becomes a bit stiffer, a bit less responsive. That's a normal part of aging, and it happens to all of us to some degree. But there's another process that can happen alongside this natural stiffening, and it's one that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Your body needs calcium for strong bones. That's something we've all heard since we were children. But here's what's less widely understood. As we age, calcium doesn't always end up where it's supposed to. Instead of being deposited into your bones where it belongs, calcium can start settling into soft tissues, including the walls of your arteries. This process is called arterial calcification, and if you need a mental picture, think of it like rust or mineral deposits building up inside a pipe. The pipe itself becomes harder, less flexible, and the space inside narrows just a bit. When that happens in your arteries, it creates a cascade of effects throughout your entire body. When your arteries stiffen, your heart has to work harder to pump blood through them. Imagine trying to push water through that stiff garden hose versus the flexible one. It takes more effort, more pressure. That's exactly what your heart is dealing with. And when circulation becomes less efficient, that's when you start noticing the symptoms we talked about earlier. The fatigue, because your muscles and organs aren't getting oxygen-rich blood as easily as they once did. The cold hands and feet, because blood flow to your extremities is reduced. Even higher blood pressure readings, because your heart is compensating for those stiffer vessels. Now, this is where standard medical advice comes in, and I want to be very clear. The medications your doctor prescribes for cholesterol and blood pressure are important. Statins help manage cholesterol levels. Blood pressure medications help your heart not have to work quite so hard. These are valuable tools, and if you're taking them, please continue to do so. They're managing real concerns and providing real protection. But here's the thing. They're addressing the symptoms and the risk factors. They're helping manage what's happening, but they're not directly addressing where calcium goes in your body. Your statin can lower your cholesterol. Your blood pressure medication can ease the workload on your heart. But neither of them tells your body to put calcium into your bones instead of your arteries. That's a different conversation entirely, and it's one that requires a different kind of support. This is where a lesser-known nutrient enters the picture, one that acts almost like a traffic controller for calcium, directing it to the places it helps and away from the places it harms. The reason this doesn't come up in most routine checkups is simple. It's not part of the standard protocol. Doctors are trained to prescribe medications that manage cardiovascular risk, and those medications work. But the nutritional piece, the part about optimizing where minerals go in your aging body, often falls through the cracks. Not because it's not important, but because there's only so much time in a 15-minute appointment, and the focus naturally goes to what's most urgent. What I'm offering you today is the rest of that conversation, the part that fills in the gap. The nutrient we're talking about is called vitamin K2, and while you may have heard of vitamin K in general, K2 is a specific form that has a very particular job in your body. Its technical name is menaquinone, but what matters more than the name is what it actually does. Vitamin K2 activates certain proteins in your body that act as guides for calcium. These proteins essentially tell calcium where to go, directing it into your bones and teeth where it strengthens your structure, and steering it away from soft tissues like your arteries, kidneys, and other places where calcium deposits can cause problems. If you need a visual, think of vitamin K2 as a traffic controller at a busy intersection. Calcium is constantly moving through your bloodstream, and without proper direction, it can end up anywhere. Vitamin K2 stands at that intersection with clear signals. Bones, yes. Arteries, no. It's not forcing anything unnatural. It's simply helping your body do what it's designed to do, but often struggles with as we age and as our diets shift away from the foods that naturally provide this nutrient. Now, what does the research actually tell us? There have been some significant observational studies, including one called the Rotterdam study, that followed thousands of adults over several years. What researchers found was that people with higher intakes of vitamin K2 were associated with less arterial calcification and better cardiovascular health markers overall. Another body of research suggests that vitamin K2 may help reduce arterial stiffness over time, which means your blood vessels may regain some of that flexibility we talked about losing. These aren't small, obscure studies. They're large, conducted observations that have caught the attention of researchers around the world. It's also important to understand that vitamin K2 doesn't work in isolation. It works alongside vitamin D and calcium, almost like a team. Vitamin D helps your body absorb calcium from food. Calcium provides the raw material for bone strength, and vitamin K2 makes sure that calcium ends up in your bones rather than your arteries. If you're taking vitamin D and calcium supplements, which many older adults are, adding K2 into the mix may help ensure those supplements are actually doing what you want them to do. It's not about replacing anything, it's about completing the picture. So what can you realistically expect if you start supporting your body with vitamin K2? Let's talk about timelines, because I don't want to set up false expectations. This is not an overnight transformation. In terms of noticeable changes in circulation, things like warmer hands and feet, a bit more energy, or finding that walk to the mailbox feels a little easier. Most people report subtle improvements somewhere between 4 and 12 weeks. It's gradual enough that you might not notice it day to day, but if you think back over a month or two, you realize something has shifted. When it comes to actual changes in arterial flexibility, the kind of changes you might see on medical imaging or in how your cardiovascular system functions, we're talking about months to a year of consistent support. Your body is reversing or slowing a process that's been building for years, so patience is part of the equation. But here's what people often tell me. They feel steadier on their feet. They notice their stamina lasting a bit longer through the afternoon. Their extremities don't feel quite as cold. These are subtle, quality-of-life improvements, but they add up to feeling more like yourself again. This isn't about miracles or dramatic before and after moments. It's about giving your body what it needs to function a little bit better, a little bit more efficiently, so that the everyday things, walking, moving, staying warm, having energy, become just a bit easier again. Now that you understand what vitamin K2 does, the natural next question is, how do you actually get it? There are several ways to support your body with this nutrient, and I want to walk you through them from the most basic to the most effective, so you can make an informed decision about what fits your life and your needs. Let's start with food, because that's always the ideal foundation. There are certain foods that naturally contain vitamin K2, and interestingly, many of them are foods that our grandparents' generation ate regularly, but that have largely disappeared from modern American diets. The absolute highest source of vitamin K2 is something called natto, which is fermented soybeans. It's a traditional Japanese food with a very strong, distinctive taste and a sticky texture that's quite unlike anything else. If you've never tried it, I'll be honest, it's an acquired taste. But a single serving of natto can provide an extraordinary amount of K2, far more than almost any other food. If you're adventurous and can find it at an Asian grocery store or health food store, it's worth trying. For those of us with more conventional palates, there are other options. Certain cheeses, particularly Gouda, Brie, and Edam, contain meaningful amounts of K2. The key is that these are traditional, full, fat cheeses, often from grass-fed cows. The fermentation process and the diet of the animals both contribute to the K2 content. Egg yolks, particularly from pasture-raised chickens, also contain K2, as does grass-fed butter and chicken liver. You'll notice a pattern here. These are all traditional, whole food animal products, often from animals raised on pasture rather than in confined feedlots. That's not a coincidence. The modern industrial food system has shifted away from these foods, and our collective intake of K2 has dropped significantly as a result. Research into traditional diets has found that populations who consume these K2-rich foods regularly, think of traditional European or Japanese diets, had notably lower rates of heart disease. That's observational data, not proof of cause and effect, but it's compelling nonetheless. The challenge with relying on food alone is that it's quite difficult to reach therapeutic levels unless you're eating natto daily or consuming significant amounts of these other foods. For most of us, dietary sources are a good foundation, but they may not be enough on their own, especially if we're trying to address existing arterial stiffness. Now, you might be thinking, what about leafy greens? I've heard those have vitamin K. And you're right, they do. But they contain vitamin K1, which is a different form. K1 is found in foods like kale, spinach, broccoli, and Brussels sprouts, and it plays an important role in blood clotting. Your body can convert a small amount of K1 into K2, but the conversion rate is very low. Studies suggest less than 10%. So while eating your greens is absolutely good for your overall health, it's not sufficient for supporting arterial health in the way we're discussing today. Think of K1 as helpful for general wellness, but not the specific tool we need for calcium management. When it comes to supplements, there are two main forms of vitamin K2 you'll encounter, and understanding the difference matters. The first is called MK4. This is a shorter-acting form of K2 that's been used in some Japanese studies, particularly around bone health. The dosages used in those studies were quite high, around 45 milligrams daily, and because MK4 doesn't stay in your bloodstream very long, it typically requires multiple doses throughout the day. It can be effective, but it's less practical for most people, and it's generally something you'd use under specific medical guidance, rather than as a general support strategy. The second form, and the one that has the most robust research behind it for cardiovascular support, is called MK7. This is the form that's naturally found in natto, and it has a much longer life in your body. It stays active in your bloodstream for 72 hours or more. That means you only need to take it once a day, and it maintains steady levels throughout that time. This is the form that was highlighted in the Rotterdam study I mentioned earlier, where researchers found that higher K2 intake was associated with a 50% lower risk of arterial calcification. Other prospective studies have shown that dosages in the range of 180 to 360 micrograms daily were associated with improved arterial elasticity over time. For most adults over 60, especially those with a family history of heart disease, existing osteoporosis, or simply a diet low in fermented foods and traditional animal products, MK7 appears to be the most practical and well-supported option. The typical dosage range for general support is between 100 and 200 micrograms daily. Some people under medical guidance go higher, but that's a conversation to have with your healthcare provider. When you're choosing a supplement, form matters. Look for MK7 that's derived from natto extract, as that's the most studied source. And because K2 is a fat-soluble vitamin, it's best absorbed when taken with a meal that contains some fat, a bit of olive oil on your salad, an avocado, even a pat of butter. Without fat, absorption drops significantly. You'll also want to look for products that have been third-party tested by organizations like USP, NSF, or Consumer Lab. That gives you some assurance that what's on the label is actually in the bottle. Now here's the critical caution, and I need you to hear this clearly. If you're taking warfarin, which is also called Coumadin, or any other blood-thinning medication, you must talk to your doctor before taking vitamin K2. Warfarin works by blocking vitamin K, so supplementing with K2 can interfere with how your medication functions. This is not a minor interaction, it's significant, and it requires medical supervision. Similarly, if you have any clotting disorders, this is a conversation to have with your healthcare team first. For most people not on blood thinners, K2 is considered very safe, but this particular interaction is one you cannot ignore. The beauty of MK7 is that it works quietly in the background, supporting your body's natural processes without requiring you to overhaul your entire life. It pairs well with vitamin D, which many older adults are already taking, and with magnesium, which supports many of the same pathways. Together, these nutrients form a team that helps your body manage calcium more effectively, getting it into your bones where it strengthens you, and keeping it out of your arteries where it causes problems. Let me spend a little more time on MK7, because if you're going to take one thing away from this conversation, this is likely the most practical and well-supported option for most people watching. What makes MK7 stand out isn't just that it's been studied extensively, it's that the way it behaves in your body makes it uniquely suited for the kind of long-term support we're talking about. The key advantage is bioavailability, which is just a scientific way of saying how well your body can actually use it. When you take MK7, it stays active in your bloodstream for a remarkably long time, up to 72 hours or more. Compare that to MK4, which clears out much more quickly and requires you to take multiple doses throughout the day just to maintain steady levels. With MK7, one dose in the morning with breakfast is enough to keep those calcium-directing proteins activated all day and into the next. That's not just convenient, it also means more consistent support for your arteries and bones. Because it stays active longer, you also need a much lower dose to achieve the same effect. Where MK4 studies often used 45 milligrams, MK7 research shows benefits at just 100 to 200 micrograms. That's a fraction of the amount. Lower doses mean less burden on your system and a more gentle, sustainable approach. And when we look at the cardiovascular outcomes specifically, MK7 is the form that shows up again and again in the research tied to reduced arterial stiffness and better heart health markers. It's simply the most studied and most validated form for what we're addressing here. So how do you use it safely and effectively? First, always take MK7 with a meal that contains some fat. It doesn't have to be a lot. A tablespoon of olive oil, a handful of nuts, a couple of eggs, even a slice of cheese. Vitamin K2 is fat-soluble, which means it dissolves in fat, not water. Without fat present, your body simply can't absorb it properly, and you're not getting the benefit you're paying for. This is one of those small details that makes a big difference. Second, if you're already taking vitamin D3, which many older adults are for bone health, you're actually setting yourself up beautifully. Vitamin D and K2 work as partners. Vitamin D helps your intestines absorb calcium from the food you eat, and K2 makes sure that calcium goes to your bones instead of your soft tissues. Taking them together is more effective than taking either one alone. If you're not currently taking vitamin D, it's worth discussing with your doctor, especially if you live in a northern climate or don't spend much time outdoors. Magnesium is another nutrient that supports these same pathways. It's involved in activating vitamin D, and it also plays a role in bone mineralization and cardiovascular function. Many older adults are low in magnesium without realizing it. So if you're building a foundational supplement routine, the combination of D3, K2, and magnesium creates a really solid framework for healthy aging. Now, let's set realistic expectations, because I don't want you to think this is a quick fix or some kind of miracle solution. MK7 is about long-term arterial health. It's preventive and supportive. If you've been dealing with stiff arteries and reduced circulation for years, it's going to take time, months, potentially a year or more, to see measurable changes in flexibility or cardiovascular function. What you might notice sooner are those quality of life improvements. A bit more warmth in your hands and feet, slightly better stamina, a general sense that movement feels a little easier. And here's what MK7 will not do. It will not replace your blood pressure medication, your statin, or any other prescription your doctor has given you. Those medications are doing important work, and you should continue them unless your doctor tells you otherwise. What K2 does is fill in a gap that medications don't address. It's complementary, not competitive. Think of it as adding another layer of support to what you're already doing, not as a substitute for medical care. This is about working with your body's natural processes, giving it the tools it needs to manage calcium properly, and supporting your long-term health in a way that's grounded in good science and respect for how your body actually works. Now let's talk about how to actually put this into practice, because knowledge without action doesn't change anything. I'm going to give you a simple, step-by-step approach that you can start today or tomorrow. One that's realistic for real life and doesn't require you to overhaul everything at once. In your first week or two, keep it simple. Start with 100 micrograms of MK7 daily, taken with either breakfast or lunch, whichever meal typically has a bit of fat in it. If you're having eggs in the morning, that's perfect. If lunch includes a salad with olive oil or a sandwich with cheese, that works too. The key is pairing it with fat so your body can actually absorb it. Set the bottle next to your coffee maker or your vitamins so you don't forget. Consistency matters more than perfection here. During these first 2 weeks, if you can tolerate dairy and eggs, try adding 1 serving of full-fat dairy or pasture-raised eggs to your daily routine. Maybe that's a slice of Gouda as an afternoon snack or an extra egg at breakfast. You're not trying to reach therapeutic levels through food alone, but every bit helps, and these foods offer other benefits too: protein, healthy fats, other nutrients your body needs. If dairy doesn't agree with you, or you avoid it for other reasons, don't force it. The supplement is doing the heavy lifting. And this should go without saying, but I'll say it clearly. Keep taking all your prescribed medications exactly as directed. Don't stop anything, don't reduce anything, don't make changes to your medical regimen without talking to your doctor. What you're adding here is supportive nutrition, not a replacement for medical care. As you move into weeks 3 and 4, start paying attention to how you feel. Not in an obsessive way, but just noticing. Are your hands and feet feeling a bit warmer when you're sitting in your usual chair? Do you have a little more energy in the afternoon than you did a month ago? Does that walk to the mailbox feel slightly easier? These changes are often subtle, so subtle that you might not notice them day to day. But over the course of a few weeks, there's often a quiet shift. Some people keep a simple journal, just a sentence or two each week, so they can look back and see the pattern. Others just make mental notes. Either way, don't expect fireworks. Expect gentle, gradual improvement. By the time you reach month 2 or 3, this is a good point to have a conversation with your doctor, especially if you're due for routine blood work anyway. You might ask about checking your vitamin D levels, since D and K2 work together. If you have a history of osteoporosis or cardiovascular concerns, you could ask whether any arterial health markers or calcium scores might be worth tracking over time. Not everyone needs extensive testing, but if you're curious about what's happening inside your body, or if you want to adjust your approach, this is the time to bring it up. Some people, with their doctor's guidance, increase their MK7 dose to 200 micrograms at this stage, particularly if they have significant arterial stiffness or bone density concerns. That's a decision to make collaboratively, not on your own. As you settle into an ongoing routine, think about the other factors that support healthy circulation. Gentle movement is one of the most powerful tools you have. Walking, even just 10 or 15 minutes a day, helps blood flow, keeps your vessels flexible, and supports all the work the K2 is doing. You don't need to run marathons or join a gym, just move regularly, consistently, in whatever way feels good to your body. Stay hydrated. Dehydration thickens your blood and makes your heart work harder. Keep a water bottle nearby and sip throughout the day. If plain water feels boring, add a slice of lemon or a splash of fruit juice. And here's something that matters more than most people realize. Avoid smoking, and if you drink alcohol, keep it moderate. Smoking directly damages arterial walls and accelerates stiffness. Excess alcohol does the same. I'm not here to lecture you about your choices, but if you're going to put effort into supporting your circulation with K2 and good food, it makes sense not to undermine that effort with habits that work against you. This isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. It's about small, sustainable actions that add up over time. You're not trying to fix everything in a week or reverse decades of arterial aging overnight. You're simply giving your body what it needs to function a little bit better, day by day, week by week. That's how real, lasting change happens. Not with dramatic interventions, but with steady, thoughtful support that respects how your body actually works. Before we move forward, I want to take a moment to talk about the mistakes I see people make when they're trying to support their health with vitamin K2. These aren't criticisms, they're just common missteps that can undermine your efforts, or in some cases, create real problems. If I can help you avoid these pitfalls from the start, you'll have a much better experience and much better results. The first and most critical mistake is taking K2 if you're on warfarin or Coumadin without talking to your doctor first. I mentioned this earlier, but it's important enough to repeat. Warfarin is a blood thinner that works by blocking vitamin K in your body. That's its entire mechanism. If you start supplementing with K2 while taking warfarin, you're directly interfering with how that medication functions. This can affect your INR levels, which measure how well your blood clots, and that's not something to experiment with on your own. If you're on warfarin and you're interested in K2, you absolutely must have that conversation with your prescribing doctor. There may be ways to manage it under supervision, but this is not a decision you make alone. The same caution applies to anyone with clotting disorders or anyone on other blood-thinning medications. Safety first, always. The second mistake is expecting overnight results. I understand the impulse. You're not feeling well, you want to feel better, and when you hear about something that might help, you want it to work immediately. But arterial health doesn't change in a week. The stiffness and calcification we've been talking about developed over years, even decades. Your body needs time to shift those patterns, to redirect calcium, to restore flexibility to your blood vessels. If you start taking K2 and you don't feel dramatically different after 10 days, that doesn't mean it's not working. It means your body is doing slow, steady work that you can't feel in real time. Patience isn't just a virtue here, it's a requirement. Give it weeks, give it months, and pay attention to the small shifts, rather than waiting for some big moment of transformation. Third, and this is surprisingly common, taking K2 without fat. I've said this before, but people forget or they don't realize how much it matters. Vitamin K2 is fat-soluble, which means it needs fat to be absorbed through your intestinal wall and into your bloodstream. If you take it on an empty stomach or with just a glass of water, your body can't use it effectively. Absorption can drop by more than half. You don't need a huge amount of fat, a teaspoon of olive oil, a few nuts, a bit of cheese, an egg, but you do need something. Make it a habit to take your K2 with a meal or a snack that includes fat, and you'll actually get what you're paying for. Fourth, choosing cheap, unverified supplements. I know budgets matter, and I'm not suggesting you need to buy the most expensive product on the shelf. But the supplement industry is not as tightly regulated as pharmaceuticals, and not every product contains what it claims. Look for brands that have been third-party tested by organizations like USP, NSF, or Consumer Lab. That little seal on the label tells you that an independent lab has verified the contents and quality. It's worth spending a few extra dollars to know you're getting actual MK7 in the amount listed, without contaminants or fillers that don't belong there. Fifth, and this is a big one, stopping your blood pressure medication or cholesterol medication because you're taking K2. Please, please don't do this. K2 is not a replacement for prescribed medications. It's not stronger, it's not better, it's not doing the same job. Your blood pressure medication is actively managing your cardiovascular risk right now. Your statin is lowering your cholesterol and reducing inflammation. Those are critical functions, and K2 doesn't replace them. What K2 does is address a different piece of the puzzle, where calcium goes in your body. It works alongside your medications, not instead of them. If at some point down the road your doctor reviews your numbers and decides to adjust your prescriptions, that's a conversation between you and them. But you don't make that call on your own. And finally, ignoring vitamin D and magnesium. K2 doesn't work in isolation. It's part of a system. Vitamin D helps you absorb calcium from food. K2 directs that calcium to your bones. Magnesium activates vitamin D and supports the same cardiovascular and bone health pathways. If you're only taking K2 and you're deficient in D or magnesium, you're not getting the full benefit. Think of these three as a team. They support each other, and together they're much more effective than any one of them alone. If you're not sure about your D or magnesium levels, that's another conversation worth having with your doctor, especially if you're getting routine blood work done. These mistakes are all avoidable, and avoiding them means you're setting yourself up for the best possible outcome. Safe, effective, sustainable support for your circulation, your bones, and your long-term health. I want to take a step back from the details for a moment and talk about something that doesn't get said enough. Aging is not a failure. The fact that you're in your 60s, 70s, or 80s means your body has carried you through decades of life, through stress and joy, through illness and recovery, through countless meals and movements and moments. Your body has been working for you all this time, and it deserves support and respect, not shame or frustration. When something feels harder than it used to, that's not a moral failing. It's not evidence that you've done something wrong. It's simply information about what your body needs now, and there's no shame in that. Here's something that I think is really important to understand. Many of the nutritional gaps we're dealing with today aren't because we're making poor choices. They're because the food system itself has changed dramatically over the past 50 to 70 years. Our grandparents' generation ate more fermented foods, sauerkraut, pickles, fermented dairy products. They ate organ meats like liver, which many of us grew up disliking and haven't touched in decades. They consumed butter and eggs and cheese from animals that were pasture-raised, eating grass and bugs and living outdoors, which changed the nutritional profile of those foods significantly. The industrial food system that emerged after World War II prioritized efficiency, shelf stability, and cost over nutrient density. Animals were moved into confined operations. Fermented foods were replaced with shelf-stable alternatives. Traditional fats were demonized and removed from our diets. The result is that even if you're eating what's generally considered a healthy diet today, plenty of vegetables, lean proteins, whole grains, you may still be missing certain nutrients that were abundant in traditional diets, but are now scarce. Vitamin K2 is one of those nutrients. It's not that you're doing something wrong. It's that the foods that naturally provided it have largely disappeared from the average American diet. Understanding that context takes the burden off your shoulders. You're not deficient because you failed. You're navigating a food landscape that's fundamentally different from the one previous generations experienced. And here's the good news, the part I want you to really hear. Your body is still responsive. Even now, in your 60s, 70s, 80s, your cells are renewing. Your arteries can become more flexible. Your circulation can improve. Your bones can become stronger. The human body has a remarkable capacity to heal and adapt when given the right support. And that capacity doesn't disappear at some arbitrary age. Yes, things slow down. Yes, recovery takes longer. But responsiveness is still there. Small, consistent actions, the kind we've been talking about today, add up over time. A daily dose of K2, a serving of nutrient-dense food, a short walk, staying hydrated, none of these things are dramatic on their own, but together, sustained over weeks and months, they create real change. The fact that you're here, watching this, learning about how your body works and what it needs, already puts you ahead of the curve. Most people never ask these questions. They accept fatigue and stiffness and reduced circulation as inevitable, and they resign themselves to feeling less capable with each passing year. But you're not doing that. You're seeking information. You're willing to try something new. You're taking charge of your health in a thoughtful, proactive way, and that matters enormously. Proactive health is powerful at any age, but it's especially powerful in your later decades because this is when the cumulative effects of small choices become most visible. The person who moves a little bit every day feels different from the person who doesn't. The person who supports their body with the nutrients it actually needs feels different from the person who doesn't. You have agency here. You have options. And taking advantage of those options isn't about fighting aging or denying reality. It's about living as fully and as comfortably as possible in the body you have right now. You've earned the right to feel strong, steady, and capable. You've earned the right to wake up with energy, to move without pain, to feel warm and alive in your own skin. That's not too much to ask. And supporting your body with something as simple as vitamin K2 is one practical, evidence-based way to move toward that goal. So where do you go from here? Let's make this practical and simple, because the gap between knowing something and actually doing it is where most good intentions get lost. I want to give you clear, actionable steps you can take today or this week, depending on your situation. If you're not on blood thinners like warfarin or Coumadin, and you don't have any clotting disorders, I'd encourage you to consider trying MK7 for 4 to 8 weeks and simply observe how you feel. You don't need to make a lifetime commitment right now. Just give it a fair trial. Pick up a quality MK7 supplement, remember to look for third-party testing, and start with 100 micrograms daily, taken with a meal that has some fat in it. Mark it on your calendar so you remember when you started, and then pay attention over the coming weeks. Notice your energy levels. Notice whether your hands and feet feel warmer. Notice whether that walk to the mailbox or up the stairs feels a little easier. You're not looking for miracles, just subtle shifts in how your body feels and functions. If you are on medications, whether that's warfarin, other blood thinners, or really any prescription where you're not sure how K2 might interact, bring this conversation to your next doctor's appointment. You could even print out some of the research we've talked about, or jot down a few notes so you remember what you want to ask. Say something like, I've been learning about vitamin K2 and arterial health. Given my current medications, is this something that might be safe and helpful for me? Most doctors appreciate patients who come in informed and asking thoughtful questions. And if your doctor isn't familiar with the recent research on K2, that's okay. This is still an area that doesn't always make it into standard medical training. You can explore it together. Beyond supplements, I'd encourage you to add at least one K2-rich food to your diet this week. It doesn't have to be complicated. Maybe you add a slice of Gouda or brie to your lunch. Maybe you start having an extra pasture-raised egg at breakfast. If you're feeling adventurous and you can find natto at an Asian market or health food store, give it a try. Though I'll warn you again, it's an acquired taste. Even if food alone doesn't get you to therapeutic levels, every bit helps. And these are nutrient-dense whole foods that offer other benefits as well. As you move forward, I'd suggest keeping track of your experience in some way. It doesn't have to be formal, just a simple journal entry once a week, or even mental notes if that's more your style. Write down or remember how you're feeling. How's your energy? How's your circulation? Are everyday movements feeling easier or about the same? The reason this matters is that changes can be so gradual that you don't notice them day to day. But when you look back over 4 or 6 weeks, you might see a pattern you would have otherwise missed. And if you don't notice any change, that's valuable information too. It might mean you need to adjust your approach, or it might mean your body needs more time. Either way, tracking helps you stay engaged and intentional rather than just passively hoping for the best. I also want to invite you into a conversation. If you've tried vitamin K2 before, or if you decide to try it after watching this, I'd love to hear about your experience. What changes did you notice? How long did it take? Were there any surprises along the way? Leave a comment below and share your story, because your experience genuinely helps others who are trying to make the same decision. Sometimes the most valuable insights come not from studies or experts, but from people just like you, who've walked the same path and can say, "Here's what actually happened when I tried this." So don't hesitate to contribute. Your voice matters here. And let me leave you with this. Your health is worth investing in. Not someday, not when things get worse, but right now. You've carried yourself through decades of life, and you've earned the right to feel strong, steady, and capable in your own body. You've earned the right to walk to the mailbox without getting winded. You've earned the right to have warm hands when you're sitting with your morning coffee. You've earned the right to move through your day with energy and confidence. Those aren't luxuries. They're reasonable expectations for a body that's been cared for and supported properly. Vitamin K2 is one more tool in your toolkit. A simple, evidence-based way to support your circulation, your bones, and your long-term health. It's not a cure-all, and it's not a replacement for the other good things you're already doing. But it is a meaningful piece of the puzzle, one that's been missing for too many people for too long. You now know what it does, why it matters, and how to use it safely. What you do with that information is up to you, but I hope you'll take that next step. Your body has been working for you all this time. It's worth giving it what it needs to keep working well. Thank you for being here, for learning, and for taking your health seriously. I wish you all the best on this journey. Subscribe to this channel for more advice concerning your health.